Welcome back to another reading and correcting with me, Kindar, the Tiger Writes, and Ty, the Tiger Supervisor. These are where I read a chapter from one of my stories and correct it as I go. If you want to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. And if you are looking to support me, that is on my Patreon. Today we are doing chapter 6 of Once Broken. Jacoby consulted the map on his datapad, looked around to orient himself as best as he could, and continued walking. This was a waste of time. They were being used by that Somalian, and Alex was just too distraught over tech to see it. If they didn't get caught trying to do this job, they'd go back and she'd send them to the middle of nowhere, maybe to someone she knew who'd claim to have more information and request another payment. That was how cons were run. Where was he? He'd left the orderly part of the city a while ago, and the map on his pad was barely useful. He wasn't sure it was accurate. He wasn't a fan of corporation. He didn't know anyone who'd had to live under one who was, but at least they knew how to lay out a city so you got where you wanted. Alex was also too stubborn to see reason. Even having tech out of it didn't deter him. The Somalian broke just about everything in their room when Alex wouldn't let him take charge of the job. They'd scream at each other, and Jacoby was afraid it would come to blows, but Tech had ripped the food printer from the counter and thrown it by Alex's head, embedding it in the wall. Alex hadn't even flinched. Once the Somalian had disappeared, Jacoby had pointed out his behavior, and Alex replied that even in his state he could act as muscle. Alex had laughed at the suggestion to leave Tech here for the duration of the job. Alex had contacted someone, and now Jacoby was almost certainly lost, trying to reach a place he could pick up what they need for the job. Before leaving, he snuck to the room Tech took refuge in to let him know that no matter what Alex said, if he wanted to leave, Jacoby would fly him home. But the Somalian had been sitting on the bed, knees to himself and rocking. As he watched, Tech said something harsh in Somalian. It had felt like Jacoby was watching half an argument. Tech's ears were folded back, and he winced as he snapped back replies. Jacoby left the room, creeped out. Creeped out? Creeped out. These alleys went in all directions, and either there was something wrong with the tracking satellite, or he thought as he looked at the wall in front of him, or the map was out of date. He looked at the alley, at the alley on it that should have been before him. How was he supposed to pick up the supplies if he couldn't find the place? Instead of following me, maybe you could come here and help me get where I'm going, he said as he turned, hearing them scatter, and he sighed. He shouldn't have made such a show of unclipping Termy from his back, where his jacket hid it, and putting it to his hip. He had intended it as a deterrent against any ideas his followers might have about attacking him, but now he regretted it. Any good feeling he'd had about how quaint and inviting the alleys had been when going to the temple were gone now. Now, all he wanted to do was find someone who could give him directions, pick up the supplies, and leave. Of course, he saw no one. He caught the occasional glimpse of a small Somalian, one of his followers, but they vanished the instant they realized he'd noticed them. A gang, he figured. They didn't like humans and saw the lone one walking on their turf. Yeah. On their turf as an opportunity to make a point. The pistol was probably the only thing keeping them from jumping him outright. He was so preoccupied with finding someone to give him direction, he was past the door when he realized it had the details Alex had told him to look for. The diamond-shaped crack in the stone patched with permacrete. The door blackened by fire with the arrow scratched into the bottom left corner, and the graffiti of someone something Jacoby couldn't name. He turned and found himself confronting his followers, 8 of them. The numbers had gone down, so he looked behind him and saw motion, just as luck that they decided on now to spring the ambush. Or maybe it was just lucky they were still moving, so they weren't quite ready. He would have walked into it if he'd kept going. Now they had to rearrange their plan. I'm not looking for trouble. The response sounded like the bark of the preacher. The bark, like the barks the priestess let out, then muttering in Somalian. None of it sounded friendly, and it wasn't because it was mostly growls and snarls that seemed to be a large part of their language, but it was the way they looked at him. He'd looked at a roast that was that way a while back after forgetting to eat lunch and working in a field all day. He pushed his jacket back to remind them he was armed and give himself an easier access to Termi. He had them at around 16 now. Not great odds, but they were kids, not trained fighters. They were angry at humans and looking for an opportunity to let it out. The moment he started shooting, they scattered, hopefully. Two stepped forward, claws and fangs out. The door behind the group slammed against the wall, making them jump, and Jacoby drew his pistol. The Somalian in the doorway was putting his foot down. He was on a par with Tech for size, his fur almost all white with some pale blonde and black spots here and there. He snapped a few words in Somalian. The youth replied in the disrespectful tone he'd heard often in his long life, even if he didn't understand the words. The large Somalian took one step over the threshold and the kid vanished. Even the ones behind Jacoby's were gone. The Somalian quirked a smile and turned to head back in. Are you Juff? Jacoby asked, noticing the door he'd come out of was the one blackened by fire. He stopped and looked Jacoby over. Jacoby had a sense of age from him. It wasn't the white fur that could just have been his coloring, or that he moved slowly. It was the eyes. The brown had been faded, and some of the life was gone for them, as if he'd had to give up on something that had been important to him. He walked in without saying anything, and Jacoby followed into the large room. The Somalian dropped in one of the plush chairs surrounding a pit in the center. The pit looked to have been added to the room, and a low fire burned in it. At the back was a long counter, and there had been bottles on it. If there had been bottles on it, he would have said it was a bar, but it was devoid of anything. He looked at the walls. He could just make out the discoloration where brackets and shelves had been. This had been a shop not too long ago. Possibly still was, considering that what he'd been sent to get. I'm Jacoby, he said. I'm here to get Crimson's order. The Somalian looked at him, and the pain was clear. Jacoby thought that being in this place was what caused it. He barked a few words, but the only one Jacoby understood was Crimson. A younger Somalian came in from the door, looked behind the counter. He, or she, had sandy fur with dark swirled through it. The older Somalian said something that sounded both resigned and angry. The younger Somalian replied with excitement and dismissiveness. Name, they asked. Jacoby. I'm here to pick up Crimson's order. Crimson. The Somalian left through the same door they'd entered. They spoke, then spoke louder. The older Somalian sighed and replied. More exchange, and then the younger one was back, putting 2 packs on the counter. They rattled off what sounded like a list. Jacoby got caught Peselek, which was a brand of explosive, and Dober, an accelerant. Once they were done, they looked at him expectantly. Jacoby sighed. Of course, I have no idea if you just asked me to pay for what you listed. Crimson already paid, the Somalian in the chair said. You speak. Get out. The tone was tired, pained. He said something in Somalian. The young one replied. Another exchange which ended with the young one throwing their hands in the air in a gesture Jacoby was far too familiar with. Someone was exasperated with their old man. He took the pack and headed for the door. Crimson is making a mistake, Simonian said without looking at Jacoby. This will not help. I know. Jacoby paused at the door. I don't think he cares. He's human, Simonian replied. Jacoby laughed, wondering if Alex was even that anymore. And that concludes Chapter 6 of Once Broken. If you are enjoying this, please leave a like. If you want to know when the next chapter will be up, subscribe and hit the bell. If you want to read the book as well as the others in the series, they are available at all major e-retailer. If you are looking to support me, you can do that on Patreon and get access to basically everything I've written. And if you're looking to listen to these live, it's every Tuesday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time on Twitch. The links are in the note, and with that, I shall wish you a good day.